Hello, my name's Stuart Mathews and I'm a corporate partner at Trowers and Hamlin Solicitors based in our Exeter office. I'm delighted to be joined today by Caroline Gourlay of Caroline Gourlay Business Psychology to discuss some of the key issues that typically face owner-managed and family businesses. Hi, Caroline.
Good morning, Stu. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
I'm very well indeed. It's sunny here in Bath, which always helps.
A little bit cloudy here on the fringes of Dartmoor, but hoping for a bit of sunshine later. Caroline, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm a chartered psychologist, a business psychologist, and I've been working for about 23 years now, supporting leaders. My focus as a business psychologist is on leadership. Some psychologists focus on other things, resilience, whatever, but my focus is on leadership. And I assess leaders for promotion, for selection, for investment. So I work on behalf of private equity firms, looking at whole leadership teams ahead of an investment. I coach leaders. I coach leadership teams. I work with Innovate UK Edge, as I believe they're now called, supporting scale-up businesses. And I've worked in the corporate world quite a lot. And in the public sector, but I have a real interest in owner-managed businesses and family businesses in particular. There's so much more for a psychologist to get interested in, with the dynamics of family and business. The relationships are always interesting, and at their best, family businesses can be tremendous. There is such commitment to the firm. There's such loyalty. They tend to bring other people in as like their family, and we all know that can also go wrong. So they're an interesting space to work in. So the owner managed and family business space is very much my area.
Very interesting. Well, you're speaking to the converted here somewhat, Caroline, because my first degree was in psychology before converting into law. And
missed out on this career.
I think maybe I did. I don't know, but I found my way working with owner-managed and family businesses ultimately through my legal perspective, if you like, in my career as a corporate partner. So I work with owner-managed and family businesses throughout the Southwest and regionally, nationally, and with international clients as well. And we work across multiple different industries and sectors, and at all stages of the life cycle, whether it's startup, investment growth, private equity investment, you talked about that, through to succession planning and exit. And that is really one of the key areas where I get involved in that planning process, that long-term planning process, working with owner-managed businesses in all sectors and industries, as I say, and primarily family businesses as well in the Southwest. And I regularly get involved in corporate transactions, providing legal and commercial support and guidance at the various stages of the business life cycle. So I think we probably come at this with some similar but different perspectives. And it would be really useful to flesh those out on this episode. And during this episode, I think what we're going to look at today is how well the business is being led and managed. And Caroline, you have an interesting leadership model to apply to family business in this context.
I do, yes. What I find is it's useful for people to have a structure to think about leadership. And this is the most useful one that I've come across. It's not mine. It belongs to a consultancy in Bristol called Edgecombe Consulting, who I work very closely with, actually. But it's widely used. And I've done some coaching at Oxford University Business School, for example, and they use this model. So it's quite well respected. And what it covers is the tasks of leadership. So it becomes like a job description. And I've yet to find a situation where this isn't relevant. So it has 8 tasks of leadership, 7 of which are described in the Venn diagram. And then overlaying the entire model is the task of coping with pressure, because that's like your number one leadership task. If you are going to be a sort of wibbly mess in the corner when things go wrong, then you're not going to be a very effective leader. And similarly, if you throw all your toys out of the pram because someone disagrees with you, and you can't control your temper, that's also not good leadership. So managing yourself and coping with the pressure of leadership is the first task. And then all of the others fit into these three, what they call domains of leadership. So there's a strategic domain, an operational domain, and an interpersonal domain. And each of those has a core task, and then there are other tasks where they overlap. And if we start at the top in that green area, the first task is setting strategic direction. You know, where are we going? And I used to think that that was about being good at strategic thinking, but I've come to realize that actually you can be great at strategic thinking, but you have to be able to make a decision. You know, there is a point where you have to put a stake in the ground and say, well, you know, there are all these options, but we're going this way. So that's your first bit, is to go, yeah, this is where we're going. And then between that strategic domain and the operational domain is the task of planning and organizing. So, you know, you get your systems, your plans, your structures, your processes in place at a level that's appropriate for your organization. So, you know, if you're a small family business running a farm and a whole food shop, you probably don't need the same level of processes and systems as the civil service, but you need something. And as the business grows, those systems and processes need to grow with you. And then you have the task in the operational domain of delivering results, however you measure results. And obviously financial results are a big part of how people measure results, but they're not the only way. You know, there are things that are related to business performance to do with social media engagement, client retention, that sort of thing. But results don't have to be financial at all. So a few years ago, I worked with Bristol Zoo, and they have financial results to do with the number of visitors, the number of people who take up membership, how many people come, how much do they spend in a gift shop. But their real results, their important results, are to do with how many endangered bats did they breed, how many PhDs did they sponsor, how many children came through their educational program. So results is not necessarily just about money. And the other thing to say about delivering results is that the leadership task here is about leading the delivery of results. It's not about delivering the results. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. If you think about old style command and control leadership, all you do is that left-hand side of the diagram. You know, you set a direction, you work out where you're going, you put some structures in place, and then you whip people until they deliver. And what you get is a kind of grudging compliance. It's not really leadership. People aren't following you. They're just doing what they're told. So that's why we have the entire other domain of the model, which is the interpersonal domain. And the core task there is about building and sustaining relationships so that, you know, in tough times, there is enough goodwill that people are on your side. And that's relationships with whoever you need to build them with. It's within the organization, but also outside, you know, suppliers, partners, customers, the local community, possibly. And then between the strategic and the interpersonal domain, you have that task of creating alignment. So getting all of your ducks in a row. And that's always an interesting one in a family business, about, you know, exactly who has influence here. And we'll be talking about that in a later episode, I think so. And then between the interpersonal and the operational domain, you have this task of team working. So, because you're not just building relationships for fun, you're building them in order to deliver some results. So this is making sure you've got the right people in the right place, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's about celebrating success. And then that bit in the middle, leading, is where it all comes together. And there's a lot that gets crammed in there. So there's things around setting the values of the organization, living by the values of the organization, being a role model, behaving ethically, taking difficult decisions when they're needed. Also about the place where you step back and say, where should we put our effort and attention now? Because what often happens is we do the bits that we like or we're good at, because nobody is good at all of this. Nobody. It's just not possible. And so if you're somebody for whom you know, everything's about the people, that's absolutely great, and you might spend all of your time with the people and thinking about the people. But if you're not thinking about results, then eventually you won't have a business.
Indeed.
And if results are down and you're a real results focused person, and what you do is you go, well, pedal faster, but you're going in the wrong direction, or you're all going in different directions because you've got no alignment, or your systems are hopeless, so you keep tripping over yourselves, then pedaling faster is not going to be the thing that makes the difference. So being able to stand back and say, what should we focus on now? What are our priorities right now is a really important leadership skill. So this I use as a framework in many situations, and I've yet to find a situation where it isn't helpful. And what I find is if you're addressing the question, how well is a business being led or managed, then one of the first questions is, are all of these bases being covered? Is there somebody who can do all of these bits? And one of the first things that you find very often with a lot of owner-managed businesses is that nobody's doing any of it. You know, that classic phrase that people talk about, working in the business, not on the business. That's this. There is nobody who is actually leading the business. They're all working very hard, but in the business. And what people will say is, well, we're doing the bit in the bottom left-hand corner. We're delivering results. But actually, you're not. You're not leading the delivery of results. You're simply making cheese or letting out holiday cottages or whatever it is that you do. There's, you know, if all you do is make cheese, you don't know whether you're actually selling the right amount of cheese at the right price. So do you actually, are your orders meeting your demand? Do you have enough sales in your pipeline? That's leading the delivery of results. Whereas just making the cheese is not.
You could be pedaling in the wrong direction, you mean, or burning staff unnecessarily, sort of not keeping your hand on the tiller in the right way.
Well, you could be doing any of those things, but you could even be. I mean, I know of a business where they were all working terribly, terribly hard, but actually and it was quite complex construction industry related sort of work, and after a while they realised that they were making almost no margin. So even in the context of that task of delivering results, they were doing that badly because they were spending so long doing the job as opposed to monitoring the doing of the job. So not doing any of it is a big issue. And actually, I'll just throw in for your sake, Stu, one of the big places you find this is in professional services firms like law firms, because the people who are promoted to be leaders don't actually want to lead, they want to be lawyers.
Well, that's it. So people play to their strengths, but necessarily you don't necessarily have that complement of skill sets in the owner-managed or family business in the right time.
Well, that brings us to the next sort of problem, really, is that what you get in a lot of businesses is lopsided leadership.
Right.
Where people are, if your family, you might all be quite similar. You may not, but often people are sort of similar. They have similar values, they have similar strengths. And then also people often recruit in their own image. So what you get is a leadership team that's all very similar. And then some of the bases are obviously not going to be covered. And the most common of these, or one of the most common anyway, is what I call bottom-up leadership. I was rather thrilled that when I took the top off the diagram, it does look rather like a bottom.
Very good.
Basically, people who are very good at what they do, and in a family business particularly, value relationships. So the relationship bit is really important. They know what they're doing. They know how to deliver results. They know how to get a team working together, and it's lovely and it's friendly and it might be very efficient and it's all doing really, really well. But if you haven't got the top part of the model and nobody's looking to the future, you can end up with, for example, the nicest chain of DVD rental shops that gets wiped out by Netflix because nobody looked to see what are the threats, what are the opportunities, what changes are there in our market, in our industry. So this is one one variant of lopsided leadership. But there are others. You know, I worked with a business a while ago, which had probably had this problem, and they brought in, it wasn't a family business, they brought in a chief executive who was a real transformational leader, you know, real kind of go-getter, real transformational leader. And she had recruited a team of other fast-paced, forward-thinking, change type leaders for her senior team. And she thought of them as quite diverse because they did have different sort of technical, functional skills, and there was a bit of difference in their personality. But I described them as the scream if you want to go faster team, because all of them were just, you know, go, go, go. And I did some team working with them, and my first question was, who's looking after the knitting? You know, who does this, just the general day-to-day stuff? And they said, well, actually, we've got a layer below us who do that. And I said, and how valued do they feel? Because you find it really boring. You know, isn't it really obvious to them that, oh, you know, can you just go off and do the dull stuff? And they realized they needed more. They needed to do the big strategic top of the model stuff, but they needed more connection with the bottom of the model. Else they were going to have people who were quite sort of fed up and didn't feel valued.
Yeah. And these kind of sort of focuses on one end of the spectrum, if you like, can lead to financial difficulties as well in a business, you know, sort of burning cash, having a cash flow problem, not scaling the business up for the future. If you're focused on, you might be very, very successful in selling widgets or delivering the products and services, but almost driving yourself into difficulty because you can't meet demand as you grow. So I can understand that there are multiple facets, if you like, to these issues. And businesses need to be aware of them. Absolutely.
And so this is when I go into a company, that's what I'm looking at is, you know, are these bases being covered? How well is it being led and managed? But as a lawyer, what are you looking at from that perspective?
Well, it's really interesting. You mentioned earlier Bristol Zoo and the results just not being financial and having that spread of viewpoints, if you like, or perspectives, and your responsibilities as a director, certainly in a company, so an owner-managed or family business which is being operated as a company, which so many are. Within that, the owners and operators, certainly if you're a director of the company, you have to comply with statutory duties under the Companies Act. And that's then quite interesting because you overlay that with some of the issues that you're talking about in family businesses and personal skill sets and so forth. But it's worth sort of company directors being aware of the fact that they do have statutory duties, and that's whether they are actually registered as directors at Companies House or whether they are shadow directors. So they're not actually registered at Companies House, but they're in the background calling the shots, so to speak, or whether they are actually de facto directors. In fact, by their actions, they are undertaking the role of director, but again, not necessarily recorded in the company documentation as being directors and so on. So those that are involved in the operation of companies should be aware that they do have duties, and a couple of the key ones I'd say would be the duty to promote the success of the company, and that's for the benefit of the members as a whole. And so that in that case, directors must exercise their good faith judgment and have regard to a range of matters, not just financial, a bit like your example earlier. And they need to be thinking about the likely consequences of any decision that they take in the long term, that is. So that's the long-term benefit of the company and the members as a whole. They have to think, and this is in statute, duties to consider the interests of employees, to consider, among others, a really important one in the context of your Bristol Zoo example, the company's operations and the impact that this has on the community and the environment. And we're seeing the growth of the ESG, the environmental, social and corporate governance emphasis nowadays on sustainability and societal impact. And this is something which is codified in the Companies Act 2006. So there are key areas where directors should just bear in mind that these are duties that they are bound by being directors of a company. And in exercising these duties, they should exercise those with reasonable care, skill and diligence. And again, that's something which it wouldn't be a legal test, would it, Caroline, if there wasn't an objective test and a subjective test? And us lawyers get very excited about that sort of thing.
I bet you do.
But here, a director must exercise care, skill and diligence that would be exercised by a reasonably diligent person, both with the general knowledge, skill and experience that they might be reasonably expected to have, but also the general knowledge, skill and experience that they actually do have. So that's the nature. So if there was a challenge to a director's actions or conduct, these are the sorts of things that would be looked at. So I'm not saying that these things are happening every day, but these are things that do crop up. And
I think that kind of subjective judgment about what is acting outside of directors' duties, what's in the interest of the companies, is obviously a very grey area. But there are things that happen in family businesses, and certainly in owner-managed businesses, that don't happen in other businesses, that are perhaps not in the interests of the business. They tend to be more in the interest of the family. And then things get, you're sort of bending the business to fit the family.
That's a perfect point for us to wrap things up in this first episode. We've so much to talk about on this topic that in our next episode, I hope that we will talk further about the challenges facing those who lead and manage owner-managed and family businesses. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you very much.